Welcome to the Spoiler Alert podcast and another edition of our Halloween marathon. Today, we are going to be reviewing 1985's Return to Oz. The original Wizard of Oz was released in 1939, so this is about almost 50 years after. It's got like a grimy 80s feel. We'll get into that in just a second, but before we do, I'd like to encourage everybody to subscribe, hit the like button because that helps. If you're watching on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, listen to us during work or when you're running or walking or I don't know, doing things. And then if you're on Spotify, check out our YouTube because we put in visual aids and things along those lines that are pretty fun. Return to Oz was written and directed by Walter Murch, who's actually a super famous editor. He edited THX 1138.
Oh, okay.
He edited Apocalypse Now, Godfather 1, 2, and 3, American Graffiti, The Conversation, and The English Patient.
All right. Wow. Well, that's pretty impressive.
So yeah, he's had a hell of a editing career. Did the best he could with this, with directing.
Yeah, I think as an editor, I mean, you can't really get a bigger job than say Apocalypse Now, right? So I mean, this guy's impressive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so
Dorothy in Return to Oz is played by Fairuza Balk, who you might recognize from Almost Famous, The Waterboy, and American History X. Return to Oz is set 6 months or so after the events of The Wizard of Oz concluded. Auntie Em and Uncle Henry both think that she's kind of crazy and like want to institutionalize her. And one funny like thing that happens in this first part of the movie is that they also acknowledge that like Henry's trying to rebuild the house, but he's got a broken leg, and Dorothy's like, "Hey, Auntie Em, why you being so crabby towards Uncle Henry? He's got a broken leg." And she's like, "Oh, that leg was healed months ago." And I don't even know their last names, but Dorothy's family and her are kind of not doing so hot. Around the farm, she's playing with like this, she's doing work, and there's this chicken, and this chicken finds a key.
Well, yeah, at that night, she sees a shooting star, and I guess there are a lot of logical leaps, so she concludes the next morning when she finds the key that must have been the shooting star from last night, and that her friends from Oz must have sent the key. Well, because I guess at least that part sort of makes sense because there's an insignia on the key, but I mean, yeah, I don't. A lot of logical leaps. It just kind of, it's Alice in Wonderland logic, I think, for most of the movie.
And she's trying to use the key to like prove to Auntie Em, like, hey, no, like I went there. This is real. And then she's like, we need to take you to electric shock therapy.
Yeah. This is like right after, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So, that probably didn't have the best reputation in the public consciousness. So immediately it's this sinister thing in the movie.
She goes to the shrink, and before they actually schedule the shock therapy, explains the backstory of all the characters, the Tin Man, Scarecrow, Cowardly Lion, explains it all. As far as like big themes in this film, I kind of got like Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, there was sort of that, like, because he's talking about, we're on the edge of a new century, of scientific breakthroughs and blah, 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 ultimately at the end of the movie gets electrified or something, trying to save his machine. I don't even know, like he gets killed somehow.
Yeah, there's some messy themes in this one.
Like I can't see it across the rest of the movie like at all. So it's just something that's kind of brought up.
There's some that's like industry and machinery can be like is like to be mistrusted, except for in cases like TickTock, who we meet later. And then there's like also like a greed element and a resource element that like plays in later as well. Things like that. Again, their themes are messy, but I guess we'll just point them out.
Right. When she's reciting all that, I caught her, she's just a kid. So not like, I wouldn't say her acting's overall bad. There's just something a little, she comes off as sort of like detached and sort of out of it at times, but that might almost make sense for because that's what Auntie M. And it's hard for me to really judge child actors, like I when I was a kid I could, but like now it's like I just know the really good ones. Like obviously the kids on Game of Thrones were great. There was that Cody Smith McPhee and Chloe something from like 10 years ago when they were kids, and Saoirse Ronan was great when she, yeah, I mean, so I know greatness, but otherwise I'm just kind of like, eh.
Especially in a film like this, where it's got a lot of, built-in past history, and
oh yeah,
it feels like a kid actor got a Wizard of Oz movie, That's what it feels like when I think of that character. And that's not good. It's not necessarily the actress's fault. It's probably a bit of both. It's probably a bit of her not being super transcendent, and then the overall weight of the film.
Right. Yeah, it's got a great deal of responsibility and expectation on its shoulders. And I think pretty straight away, people are going to be pretty, I think they're going to know they're not in for, they're
going to have to re-gauge their expectations.
Right. Yeah, that happens pretty quickly. But yeah, in that scene though, I caught her, she tripped over a line. But then it got me thinking that like, I see a lot of little things like that through the movie where it's like, I'm pretty sure he's just going with like the first take, maybe the first couple. Like it feels very, I don't know, like I don't know if there was, because I don't know anything. I didn't watch that video you sent me, but it does almost feel like maybe the production was a little troubled
It was, they had a little bit of trouble in the production. Just a lot of the costumes and a lot of the suits, they're all, and I love practical effects and practical makeup, practical costuming, but I can also see how much of a pain in the ass it is when the movie isn't great.
Well, yeah, it
wasn't just bad.
Right. The practical effects weren't exactly the best in this. Like it's weird though. I saw in the credits Brian Henson's name came up. So I mean, was this the Henson company? Because it's like, if it is, this is easily their worst that I've ever seen. I mean,
a lot of prosthetics through this movie are kind of like Uncanny Valley, or
they feel lifeless. They just look like a dude in a mask, right? Or something like, as opposed to the original Wizard of Oz where it was human faces and stuff. Like it's just, like it makes everything feel, it adds this feeling of like kind of loneliness and desolation that like, it's not, the whole movie is just not as full of life as the original by any stretch. So
and a big question for this movie is, who is it for? Like it's kind of become like the adopted stepchild of like kids that grew up in the 80s when like there was just randomly like dark movies like The Witches that were meant for kids, or even
Dark Crystal was kind of,
or Dark Crystal, or even in the animated world to a degree, like Land Before Time is pretty depressing if you think about it.
I like that though. I was kind of into some of that as a kid, but then there was other stuff that was just like, I don't know, like this.
I was definitely into Land Before Time when I was a little kid. I don't know. I never really got into Dark Crystal until I would watch it, ironically. But
right, I didn't like it as a kid, and then I went on to like it. I watched it, as an adult. As like, so there are a lot of movies like that. I got hung up on this whole thing where I just was like looking at weird like 80s kids movies and stuff like kind of like this, like I didn't get around to rewatching it, but I remember watching it as a kid, like Never Ending Story would probably be pretty.
Never Ending Story.
Labyrinth was one I didn't like as a kid really, but then did like later. I know a lot of kids did like Labyrinth, but that would just be a year after this. It's a similar kind of story. So that'd be another Jim Henson one with Dark Crystal. But so there's something going on there. A lot of these kinds of movies were coming out back to back.
I know that there's a lot of 80s kids that like have, grown up to have like a fondness towards these type of movies. And that's probably who these movies are, who this movie is for. Like, right. I don't think it reaches, because like a fresh kid isn't going to like this or see any value even compared to Wizard of Oz, although I don't even know if kids are watching Wizard of Oz anymore. Probably not.
Yeah, which is a shame. But I mean, but somebody coming after a 45, 46-year wait, as you pointed, you point out, is probably, this is going to be really weird for them. They're probably not going to be hugely fond of it. To say they watched The Wizard of Oz when it first came out as a kid, and then they're coming to the theater all this time later.
And the mouths on a lot of the masks don't move.
Yeah, again, they don't feel very lifelike because they're not moving. Just most of the faces aren't really moving much.
This movie might have been better off just being animated and really just sell it up, because you could still give it like a darker vibe. You know what I mean? Right. Because what's important to know is Frank Baum, the man who wrote all of the Oz books. This is probably, and this is kind of what went over in that video I sent you. So Return to Oz is actually probably the most true to the books of any of the Oz films, whether it's with Wizard of Oz or the newest movie, Oz the Great and Powerful, which I think this one actually has more cinematic value.
Okay.
So I'll give Return to Oz that. Return to Oz is probably the most true to the books, because the books are kind of fucked up, man.
Are they?
They're kind of like Grimm, like they're almost like the Brothers Grimm.
That dark.
It's just like it's just like there's like this boil man who's like boils and blisters, and he always looks like he's in pain, but he's always smiling, and he's like there's a lot of creepy shit in the books, and there's a lot of creepy shit in this movie in a certain way. There's a lot of there's life powder that you can take a fucking a hunted moose head and put it on a sofa and it becomes a new thing.
Right.
So there's and really that moose took that all in stride. I'd be more freaked out. I'd be like, just kill me. All right. Well, so that's a little bit of backstory of L. Frank Baum. The actual books are a lot darker than the original and the newest movies.
One of my favorite writers, Harlan Ellison, was just singing the praises of those books. So I mean, and he's so hypercritical of everything that it's amazing to me that, because it's a really long spanning book series from what I saw. So that there could be that many books and he wouldn't find something not to like in any of them, and is probably testament to their quality. So I mean, they must be good. But
I'm not knocking the original Wizard of Oz either, just because that fucking worked. They definitely made the right decisions. It might be one of those movies that are either I don't want to say unfilmable, because that's kind of, I don't like that term, because I think maybe it's unfilmable in maybe there are movies that are, or books that are unfilmable in an era. Like in the 80s and I think the 70s, they thought of doing Lord of the Rings, and then they're like, the technology's not here, let's just make it fucking animated. And that's when you got those. There's a couple examples where people take the time for the technology to get around to make a movie. So maybe the dark 80s vibe is the perfect time to try for a dark Wizard of Oz book, a dark Wizard of Oz story, even compared to that subgenre with Labyrinth.
Not the best of them.
And it's still not the best, even when you grade it among that subgenre.
Well, in the original Wizard of Oz, apparently had some dark shit in it. I never know, people hanging themselves or something in the background. Some dark. I don't know. There are always people combing over frames, and they find shit in these Disney movies. I don't know, but I guess that was one, that there was somebody, the silhouette of somebody hanging from a tree in the background or something. So I guess that maybe had something sinister lurking just underneath the surface. I don't. But this brings it.
That would be cool, man. Also, fun fact. Mankiewicz, who technically co-wrote, but wrote most of Citizen Kane, was a ghostwriter on the original Wizard of Oz.
Oh, really?
fun fact out there. So the guy who wrote what's regarded by many as the greatest film of all time was a ghostwriter for Wizard of Oz. So yeah, so Auntie M leaves her with the shrink to get shocked.
Oh, and we missed one other thing, and that's that Toto gets left behind earlier in the film. So
right, yeah, Toto's left behind. Toto is not really a part of the story. We get a chicken instead.
Yeah, which it took me a while to catch on to that's what was going to happen. I thought maybe Toto was going to make a return, but I'm like, oh, it's a fucking chicken. And there's a lot of importance around this chicken that's not made clear till the end, but everybody's really interested in this chicken.
Similarly to the original Wizard of Oz, there's like with Wizard of Oz, there's the people in her life that kind of become Oz characters for her dream world, sort of, if it is indeed a dream. And this girl who is kind of imprisoned with her in this psych ward gives her a jack-o'-lantern.
Well, she seems to just kind of like, well, she first appears in a reflection or something, and Dorothy doesn't seem to be weirded out by any of this, but I guess she believes in Oz, so I guess she wouldn't be, They're
hitting on a lot of like child fears here, and if a movie's going to be this expensive, like I'm not like a big studio like gotta make every dollar you can guy, but I'm also like, okay, you got to think logically. They're putting a lot of money into all these practical effects. It's not enough of an adult movie to be an adult movie,
Right.
Like it's not grown enough to be that.
It might just be us, because like I said, there were kids in our grade that like loved Labyrinth, and like I was just like, oh, why it's so ugly, and like I like it now, but it just it was so. It had that weird Jim Henson.
You need to develop a taste for it, and just even kids that might later on in life like aren't necessarily going to do it right away,
Right, you probably need to be weaned into it or something.
And, like you're making a a huge blockbuster budget film that its best hope is to be a cult classic.
Right, and it's a sequel to one of the most significant movies ever made, too. So it's like
it's kind of a lot. It's fun to beat up on a movie sometimes.
Well, it is bizarre. It's like I think to me like the '90s Disney Renaissance era was probably the right balance of. It's dark and did have some heavy subject matter, but it was also kid friendly. I think they struck the right balance there in the 90s.
Yeah, like Lion King, you had like some happy fucking Hakuna Matata. You had Just Can't Wait to Be King. And then you had Mufasa die and his uncle fucking did it. And then, hyenas are eating people and like.
But they could get dark, but it wasn't all encompassing. Like, there were breaks. So this just has like this creepy atmosphere that's like, I don't know. It's not any one scene. It's just the whole thing is weird.
They put her in shock therapy, and if you hadn't scared your kids at this point, you're about, they're showing them like some fucked up violence of children, which usually doesn't go well among kids or their parents when they go.
But it's kind of like a Jacob's Ladder scene, since we just did that one where she's being wheeled in a journey down the hallway. So there, we've got a visual motif going.
But just before that happens, I believe the power goes out because it's a lightning storm outside, and then the girl undoes her straps. The girl that we had just seen through the mirror and given the jack-o'-lantern and all that. And they rush out of the hospital. And like the one-to-one comparison in this movie to the tornado is this river during this rainstorm.
Yeah.
They hop on this river. She gets like in this crate that somehow stays afloat. We just think the other girl drowned.
Yeah.
Like if at this point, if you haven't like, if you had no exposure to the original Wizard of Oz, you think that the other girl drowned. And she wakes up with the chicken in the, I forgot how the chicken in any way got into the crate.
I think they were just trying to kind of cleverly frame it, like using shadows and cutting out some of the box so that like the chicken was probably just always there and we didn't see it. And Dorothy was so desperate to get into the box that she just didn't see it.
She doesn't know it for about like 30 seconds, but we're in Oz now. And the crate is like washed up on this shore desert area where there is water, but it's all evaporating and going down into the ground. And then she recognized that as the deadly desert, which if you touch, you turn to sand and grow the desert.
But
So
very
they
lucky for her, she's right on the razor's edge, and there are a bunch of rocks that she can step, you know, what do you call that? Stepstones, basically.
and the stones also we see have faces and they talk and they speak to someone that we don't quite see, where it's like Dorothy is back.
Right.
And she has a chicken. Ooh. And then there's a big voice that says, "What?"
I think it's a hot chicken. And everybody's like freaking out over the chicken throughout the course of the film. And you're just like, why? You know, but there is an answer. I didn't know if we were ever going to get one, you know, but we do. So
they find a lunch pail tree to get some lunch. And then they find the old house that was from Kansas that landed in the first film. And now like that area of Munchkin Land or whatever is just completely wooded over, and the yellow brick road is all fucked.
Yeah. Which is exactly how she puts in the movie. She's like, oh no, it's fucked.
But they follow it nonetheless, and they find Oz and see that Oz, or the Emerald City, is fucked.
Yeah.
All the inhabitants that we see are turned to stone, including the Tin Man and the lion, the Cowardly Lion. And then we do not see Scarecrow quite yet, but we learn more about that in a little bit. And then these fucking Wheelers show up, which are like these henchmen that filming that as those actors, like, I don't care if they're bad actors, like that just seems like a pain in the ass.
Yeah, they're freaky
so
looking.
Unnecessary too. Like like just make them guards that have fucking spears or some shit and make them cool, and then you could stand and not.
Well, I actually like the Wheelers, so just because they are so fucking weird looking, it's just so disturbing. I mean, you know, like I think it would freak the fuck out of kids. There you go. If you want to have interesting kids, make them watch the movie. Yeah. So.
Well, I would say that the cool thing about the Wheelers, like the cool, like maybe freak someone out thing about the Wheelers, is that like since they're looking down when they do their thing, they got the helmet that's a different face. So that could kind of be like, I see where you're getting that there.
I think I've seen that one other place. I want to say it's the Chronicles of Riddick, where they had face helmets.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So yeah, it's just a weird visual. It's and they're like the only life we've encountered so far. So yeah, I mean, Oz is very fucked. Like whatever's going on.
The Wheelers notice the chicken and they're like, there's no chickens allowed in the Emerald City. And they chase her down, and then they find this wall. So maybe it's not exactly an ex machina, but it feels like an ex machina that like, hey, the wall, like, oh, there's the keyhole that your key that you found from.
Well, just like her washing up right at the edge of the desert with those rocks there. Because if that hadn't happened, well, she's fucked. She's stranded in the middle of the desert, you know. So, yeah, I mean, but it's all whatever Wonderland logic. So, you know, very Lewis Carroll.
Yeah, you know. But she ends up using that key to get into this doorway, and inside the doorway is this tin robot looking thing, and it's TickTock. And I think the big theme they're hitting on here is AI. And
yeah, probably.
But yeah, so TickTock's like this round looking copper fucking robot that you have to wind up different aspects, where it's like action, you got to wind it up. Thinking, you got to wind it up. Speech, you got to wind it up. And so they eventually wind it all up, and
he's always clunking out as the other thing, you know, so at really inopportune times.
And TickTock reveals that he was basically sent by Scarecrow to hide in this place, and then Dorothy would come and find him, and then TickTock would help. And TickTock does help. He fights off the Wheelers pretty well, but immediately runs out of action. And
he tells Dorothy to run up the stairs, which I'm like, that's not a bad idea. You'd think stairs would be the natural nemesis of these Wheelers, just find a stairway,
But, unless they can shred on the rails,
Oh yeah,
like a good skateboarder. He takes one of the Wheelers like by the collar or whatever and interrogates him, and the Wheeler says that the Gnome King took all the emeralds, and Mombi, who is this witch that's basically the nurse in the real life, and then the Gnome King is basically the doctor shrink in the real life. And Mombi knows where Scarecrow is basically what the Wheeler gives up. So they go to see Mombi in this like weird castle thing, and she's able to change her head. She has like 30 heads that she uses, and
she's got this massive head collection. It's almost as impressive as mine. And it's a weird, it's just another one of those like weird visual things that are gonna freak the hell out of a kid. They're kind of good effects, I mean, for the time. I don't know how they're quite accomplishing that, but and then I knew where it was gonna go too. Or at least I half suspected that, wait, well, now she's going to want Dorothy's head. But then I thought maybe not, because she's a kid. But there's a solution to that. You let the head ripen for a few years in a tower, and then you harvest it. So that's her plan. Because I guess, once the head's off, it doesn't age or something. I don't know. But whatever, logic.
Exactly. And then the tower that she sends Dorothy to happens to have Pumpkinhead, who is this barely animate object. Is how I would explain it, because like this is kind of what we're talking about, where like the mouth doesn't move on these prosthetics and practical effects. Eyes don't blink, anything like that. It's just
that's what maybe. So you're saying it costs a lot of money, but like in a lot of the production value, I mean, I'm not really seeing it. Well,
I should say there's a lot of background costs, because like if you look at like the large swaths of people towards the end, there's like full-fledged frog costumes. There's
that fight, but I was just thinking, I mean, they have that all throughout like the original movie, like, I mean, it was a lot more full of life, and you had a big gathering at the end, I think, like that.
Yeah, I mean, I just think like the sheer like raw material used was a lot. It just wasn't done all that well. Is a big thing. So in 80s dollars, the budget for Return to Oz was $28 million, which is quite a bit. And then it box officed $11 million.
Oh, shit.
So that's a big old hit.
Yeah.
So like there's just, some costs. And I think like a lot of that stuff takes time. And the more time you take with stuff, the more catering you have to do, the more bullshit that just adds up and adds up and adds up.
But yeah, like, I mean, it is Oz, so you'd think you're going to have like, I mean, people are going to flood in, you would think, but apparently they didn't. So unless you just kind of thought like, well, how are you going to do a sequel to Oz that's going to be as good? I mean, Judy Garland can't come back, and
I mean, I'd imagine the release date was fine, because that's usually how those movies go. And then it's like after the release where people are like, guys.
Oh, okay.
This movie, what it is. And then the second and third weeks, which are super important for a release, tank. But yeah, and like Pumpkinhead too is like just other like just weird like images of like the first time we meet this character, his legs are fucking detached, and he's like, "Oh, help me!" and so she ropes together his legs.
He's sort of a scarecrow himself, Jack Pumpkinhead. I mean, I think that was his purpose, right? It was to be essentially a scarecrow.
TickTock is kind of like Tin Man,
right?
Scarecrow, or Pumpkinhead is kind of like Scarecrow. The chicken is kind of like Toto.
Right. We don't have an equivalent to the Cowardly Lion, but I mean, but otherwise, right.
Maybe the closest thing would be the Moose Sofa.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's not a very good equivalent. But honestly, throughout this movie, Pumpkinhead might be the most useless character.
when he has this weird insistence on calling her mom, I don't know why. It's weird, but so
But yeah, so she fixes him. He's Jack Pumpkinhead. Uh, he tells her to call him Jack. They get TickTock back from the hallway and tell him that they plan to break out of there. And she builds a sleigh with this life powder that she steals from the headroom. And once she picks it up, the main head alerts
body.
the headless body to walk over and get her, which
Getting its beauty sleep or something.
So while this is all happening, Tin Man and Pumpkinhead are putting together this sofa, like tying together two sofas. And horrifically, if you actually think about it, a formerly live moose, or maybe in the world they call them Gumps. We end up calling this character a Gump, taxidermied severed head of a moose.
Right. It becomes like this fucked up flying reindeer thing. But yeah, like you said, I mean, he was alive, then dead, now alive again as a severed head attached to a sofa.
And its last memories are literally seeing a hunter walk through the woods and hearing a loud bang. If I'm that moose, I'm like, just kill me and my misery.
It's like Alien, kill me. But no, I'm thinking like it brings up all those ethical questions. Like, wasn't there that Italian neurosurgeon or whatever that wanted to transplant that guy's head, and everybody's like talking about the ethics of that? I guess the guy backed out. But I mean,
yes, I think people are okay with face transplants. Brain transplants, I don't know about.
No, it's a full head transplant that this guy wanted to do, because this guy had some degenerative disease where his body was going to fail him, and his only hope was to have a head transplant. But everybody's like, well, that's not going to. Everybody's like, okay, well, even if that has any success, it'll last about 5 seconds, and the guy's going to be in absolutely horrific pain, before he dies. So there's like a lot of ethical discussion, but the guy backed out, even though, I mean, it was really his only hope, but everybody was saying it's like not going to work. But anyway, yeah, so it's like that. I mean, the moose head thing. So his head is transplanted onto a sofa, and he's forced to fly around Oz, and yeah.
And some wheelers follow them and run right into the desert. So we see how the desert turns people into sand. And then the sleigh is breaking apart midair. Jack's head falls off. And
we get a really weird line from Dorothy where she's like, there are a lot of those throughout this, so I'm probably forgetting a bunch of them. But one that stuck out to me was like, guys, no matter what happens, I'm sleepy. And I'm glad that I have my own head to be sleepy with. I'm like, okay.
That's great. And when Pumpkinhead's head is falling down, it's like speaking to us, like, I'm falling. And they like nosedive to catch up to it. And then they reach the equilibrium. And then
was
it
terminal velocity or something?
Terminal velocity. Yeah, the whatever it is, feet per second. I think
the sleigh is going to be heavier than the Pumpkinhead, so maybe they would be able to catch up to it. But
right,
physics are really important.
I'm not, because all things fall eventually at the same exact rate.
Yeah, but it takes them a while to hit that point. So I'm wondering if the sleigh being heavier that's called terminal velocity, but like, couldn't the sleigh it takes a while to hit that.
Yeah,
maybe they could catch up.
Well, like surface area is a big variant on that happening. Because obviously, like, gonna be more resistance
with the sleigh.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I don't know, but
well, we have to get right. The physics in this movie are deeply important. I mean, it's not like...
But as soon as they get Jack Pumpkinhead's head back, the rest of the sleigh just falls apart. Like so it didn't even fucking matter. And the chicken, and this is important, the chicken hides in Jack's head. But luckily they fall right where they were trying to go, to the mountain of the Gnome King.
Lucky.
I mean, yeah, it was just good timing.
Oh, and Dorothy survives the fall by landing on the couch. So again, I mean, we should probably get Neil deGrasse Tyson in here, but I'm sure that would work out.
And the Gnome King takes rock form on the outside of the cliff. questions them and realizes that it's Dorothy, and basically causes a little bit of an earthquake and gets Dorothy to fall into his caverns, and she sees just a sea of emeralds, basically, all the emeralds that were stolen from the Emerald City.
And it also seems like it might be a volcanic mountain, because of, like, there's a point where he says, "Look at my inferno" or something, and
yeah, or my
actually,
furnace.
I think we see lava at the end of when he starts. Well, yeah, so I think it's supposed to maybe be a volcano as well. I don't know.
And then at the end of her fall, Scarecrow catches her. So that's one of, like, I'm tempted to say clever scenes, but like as far as like just scenes of like a reveal, like of a character that we've talked, that any movie would have talked about throughout the movie, and then have an action sequence, and right at the end of that action sequence reveal that character. I think that's actually pretty clever. Not necessarily original, but it's just clever. It's like a good device. It's nice.
But it was interesting too, because at that like exact moment right before it happened, I was thinking, oh, we're not going to get to see the old characters, are we? And then we do. I mean, so that just, I was on the same, well, I don't know, like the movie seemed to be on the same wavelength as I was. Like, now it's time to introduce one of the old characters. So that worked out.
It would have been better if, the Scarecrow looked any good, because
yeah,
Scarecrow,
right, he doesn't at all.
After 50 years looked worse. At this point, we kind of get the whole spiel that the Gnome King has, where he stole the emeralds because they're supposed to be his to begin with. So that's kind of like a nature versus industry thing. So like maybe now the nature is the bad guy. I don't see, this is where it mixes up its themes, because it's like, is the nature good? Is industry bad? Is the industry, our big cities like the Emerald City, like,
it's not contradictory, it's just complicated. I mean, we just can't understand how
we're just inferior. Yeah, right. You're right. He offers them a test to get out, and he knows that they're going to fail. So this test is he turns Scarecrow into an ornament. Is a big thing. Is right after Scarecrow caught her, he disappeared, and the Gnome King turned him into an ornament of some sort.
And then the thing is, like, you have to guess which thing, Scarecrow is. And so I think across between all of them, they have 3 guesses. Like, I don't think they have 3 each. It's just, right, it's just each one of those characters.
I think they each had 3, actually.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. So the Gump failed right away, because the Gump's an idiot that just got back, like, turned into life.
Well, maybe he failed deliberately to escape this living hell as a severed head on a,
He'd rather be an ornament.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe like
he wants to go back to being an ornament. He was a head on a wall, and things were simpler then. So,
simpler then. Jack goes in. Jack fails because he's not all that smart either. TickTock, who's the only competent one, he faked that his action stopped.
Oh,
and then some of the guards.
I was pretty drunk by that point in the movie.
Fair. And then one of the guards was like, the robot's action is stopped. And then he's like, Dorothy, you can go in and wind him up, and then whatever. While this is all happening, the Gnome King reveals that he has the ruby slippers, which are also made of rocks that came from the mountain. And
it's a really morally complicated movie, because she insists that the emeralds, they were found, not stolen, and then he says that, well, I found your ruby slippers, I didn't steal them, and so and then he tempts her. He says that she can go back to Kansas if she just leaves her friends behind, but it's kind of, Kansas sucks too, so it's not that complicated of a decision. Like, she can go back and get ECT or drown in a river or whatever, or stay here. So both options just really suck for Dorothy, and she presses on and tries to help her friends. So
okay, so when TickTock reveals that he was faking to Dorothy, now in my notes it said that he cries. Oh yeah, he did cry. Yep, he cried some oil. Okay. Yeah. I wasn't remembering. I was like, did he just start weeping for no good reason? Like,
and then
I'm panicking.
Well, the whole thing there was he insists that he can't feel anything, right? He's, you know, I think he says early on that because one of the Wheelers says you'll regret this, and he's like, regret would be a feeling, and I am a machine, so I cannot feel, you know, regret or you know whatever. So, but now here he's crying, so he's a real boy, and yeah,
yeah. He just explained to Dorothy like, hey, I can't feel fear anyway, so I'm gonna guess wrong, and you pay attention to how I get turned into an ornament, and then you'll be able to get out of here. And this is his sacrifice, and like you said, he's a real boy now.
Oh, there's another thing as far as the effects go. So the Gnome King starts out like, you know, as like claymation, and then suddenly just somewhere in there he's like live action with just, and really not even really any prosthetics, like they just painted the guy's face gray, you know, like stone, and he's puffing out a pipe. It just happens like abruptly. And then he says something about like soon I'll be human, so I'm thinking like, is he gaining humanity gradually by turning other people to stone, and I just missed this as a plot element, or what? Because it's really jarring going from the claymation to like the live action thing. I didn't know if that was the explanation, is that he's becoming more human the more.
That's a fair question. I have no fucking answer.
Okay.
And then Mombi arrives and starts to try to warn the Gnome King about a chicken, but like the Gnome King is like too angry at Mombi at this point to kind of like stop and listen.
Yeah, he traps her in a cell to be dealt with later. She's helping the Wheelers will help her, but they're getting the fuck out of there because she's already put them in danger. I don't know. In any case, they're like, fuck her, and they take off. So, you know.
So she eventually guesses right because she picks up an emerald and it becomes Scarecrow. And then she realizes that the ornaments that she has to grab are all green. So she manages to bring back, I think, Scarecrow. I think she brings everyone back but TickTock right away. Because they bring back Pumpkinhead, they bring back the chicken's in the Pumpkinhead. And then they bring back the sofa. And then they bring back Scarecrow, and they don't quite have time to bring back TickTock yet. But, you know, he's not a living person anyway, so it's like, oh, worthy sacrifice, yada, yada, yada. And then the Gnome King had never actually had this in the cards of them winning. Right. So he gets, like, in his, like, lava furnace or whatever, just becomes, like, this giant form, and he eats the sofa's body. Somehow I forgot how,
but a tug of war with him, and so the head comes off the sofa, so they manage to save the moose's head, but the sofa gets eaten. So
and I think the moose is like, oh, I didn't like that anyway.
Like you said, kill me, please.
Just kill me. And then he tries to eat Jack, but the fucking chicken he realizes is in Jack's head, and then the chicken gets scared and lays an egg, and the egg rolls around. It drops into the Gnome King's stomach.
But yeah, the chicken was trying to lay the egg the whole movie and finally does. So that's the chicken's arc, I guess.
And then he basically just dissolves because eggs are poisonous or something.
Yeah. All the was it the Wheelers or start saying poison, or no, all the other rocks, and then he's like, don't you know? Chicken eggs are poison, and those are his last words.
I'm really glad it explained to the audience what was going on too. I mean, we needed it.
And then the chicken seemed to understand this because she's like, you're damned right, it's poison. I'm like, okay. So, but I thought it was just like she basically shit out an egg because she was so scared or something. But I
thought she was scared too. Like,
know. But I guess it was deliberate.
She was scared, and then she's just like later taking credit for it.
Like, yeah, right. Yeah.
Of course, the whole time.
Yeah, I'm the hero.
I'm a mastermind. I wasn't just hiding the entire time.
Right.
So the king is dead. Dorothy snatches the slippers, and then wishes everything back to the way it should be. And around, they find around the moose's head in the antler is I guess this may have been part of her wish, but like is another green ornament, and it's TickTock. bring back TickTock. They hug. It's all
Yeah, they're lamenting that TickTock didn't make it, and then they find the
yeah. And also Mombi got saved, but in a cage.
Now she doesn't have her powers as a witch, so
right.
I forget why, but whatever. So,
well, I think the Gnome King gave her powers.
Oh, so without the Gnome King, she's powerless. All right,
possibly. And then they kind of have like this going away party, like they did in the original Wizard of Oz. You know, she has this decision to make. Do you want to be like princess here, or do you want to go back home? And she's like, I wish I could be in the same place at the same time. And then that's when Princess Ozma shows up, who is like the same as the girl that saved her. And we had seen visions of her earlier, but it's just in mirrors and weird.
Right.
Ozma steps out of the mirror basically to become Princess in Oz, and then Princess Ozma is like, come back whenever you want. I'm gonna check in on you, yada yada yada. Make sure you're fucking not starving to death in the Dust Bowl or any shit like that. Ozma sends her back. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, she wants to say goodbye to all of her friends, and then she's like, "Oh, I thought I'd have more time." I'm like, "Well, if Ozma has the power to bring you between worlds, why can't she give you a few fucking minutes, you know?" But so she has to quickly say goodbye to all of her friends, and a blinding light and you know encompasses her or whatever, and then she wakes up on the shores of the river. So maybe Dorothy is completely delusional, and that was all just some near-death experience. It's ambiguous, you know, and it's like Pan's Labyrinth. Well, there you go, another recommendation. So, but
and this next scene is, I didn't really notice the first time I watched it, but I laughed when I watched this time. Is as soon as Uncle Henry sees her, he ditches his crutches and runs like he never broke his leg in his life.
Right. Yeah, he's skipping around and they it's like Dr. Strangelove. I can walk, you know. Yeah, so I guess Auntie M was right. It was all bullshit.
Yeah,
so
he was just full of shit. He was just a lazy lazy bastard. Auntie M tells that like the doctor had died in the fire. Because
so it's like an electrical story. It caused a fire. That's what happened.
Yeah, and he wanted to go back to save his machines because
that's fucked up. Because there's all these prisoners like locked up and shit, right? They all burn. Like
I mean, maybe I think we may have said that everyone got out except for him because he went back for his machine.
Oh, okay. I was like, because if he's all preoccupied with this
industrial revolution or something.
Wilson's in a cage now, much as she was in Oz. So all of this is sort of paralleling or whatever a little bit.
And then one further parallel, through her mirror, Dorothy speaks to Ozma once more. I forgot what they talked about because I didn't give a shit.
She's just checking in, and then like she's like, "Auntie M, come look," because she wants to prove it. And Ozma's like, "Shut the fuck up!" And she's like, "Oh, never mind, Auntie M. It's just a reflection."
And then my last note on the movie, as they pan out to look at the farm, is that Henry is basically done fixing the house after less than a week of work.
Yeah,
like winter was closing in, Henry. You're just lazy. And that's how it ends. We kind of hit on place in society, like pretty well, like you know, just to reiterate a little bit, you know, sequel to like one of the greatest films ever, actually probably more true to the books aesthetically than either Oz the Great and Powerful or The Wizard of Oz. Doesn't make it necessarily a great movie for anybody, but there is a super niche like 80s kids or like Labyrinth lovers that could like it. So let's kick it away to your recommendations, Dakota.
Alice 1988 was one I didn't mention because it's a very Alice in Wonderland story. And then let's see. Oh yeah, and probably one of my odder recommendations would be Hellbound, Hellraiser 2, also from 1988. But if you like really strange worlds and plots that don't make a lot of sense logically, then there's another one. So that'd be about it. Everything else I hit on, you know, like probably Dark Crystal, Labyrinth. I guess more recent, like if we're going out of the 80s, then Pan's Labyrinth, weirdly enough. And
Yeah.
The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So, which actually came up after, like, when I was playing it on Disney Plus. Like, that was the next one. So,
Oh, yeah, for me too.
so
Yeah, some similar recommendations over here. Like Dark Crystal, Black Cauldron, Neverending Story.
yeah,
And then of course the original Wizard of Whoa, we got some green screen mess going on here. Original Wizard of Oz is really great. Out of 5 stars, Dakota, how many stars are you gonna give Return to Oz?
it's one of the few that I can say with some, like, I'd say it's a 2.5. But again, much like Johnny Mnemonic, it's an interesting 2.5. It's just a bizarre artifact that, like, I think people that are kind of into strange 80s worlds, that dark stuff, Dark Crystal, Jim Henson, all that, if that's your thing, definitely worth watching. Totally. So for general audiences, anybody coming straight off of the Wizard of Oz and looking for something in that vein, they're not probably going to dig it. But
I'm with you. 2.5. I probably give it. It probably leans more to 2. I do like Johnny Mnemonic more.
I mean, it just for me, like, in fact, like, again, personally, it's more like 3.5, just because it's up my alley. I like weird shit like this, like I said, Alice 1988. I think, really weird fucking movie, very creepy, has just this desolate, it totally like this. So, like, I like that sort of thing, but not as a kid. But if you want to have an interesting kind of weird kid, then show them this one. Like I said, it's a good choice. So
I think it definitely earns a star or a star and a half just by, like, I'm not a big, like, keep true to the books guy in all instances, but in this case, it is, like, a bold move to be, like, more true to those books, because those books are kind of fucked up.
You're making it sound like, yeah, I mean, it definitely has a darker tone. I think that maybe that's the biggest thing. Like, I'm wondering if we didn't just, like, look at this as its own thing, like, maybe it'd be more like, it's okay. But, like, coming off of the original The Wizard of Oz, it's just fucking weird. I mean, like, I didn't even think about that till you pointed it out. I mean, it's like it's closer to 50 years than anything. I mean, after the fact, and just, it's got this dark, twisted, like, almost desolate, like, atmosphere. It's bizarre. It's a really bizarre sequel. So Return to Oz, I mean, I guess we said everything there was to.
Yeah, have a good day, everybody.